She was a virgin, idealistic, and only wanted to take care of a sick old man. But upon opening the bathroom door, she found a naked, tall, and muscular man. What happened after that? Not even she herself would be able to remember. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. The London sky hid behind a grey mist as Clara Sterling passed through the gates of Ashworth Manor. The fine rain that fell wasn't enough to justify the chill she felt upon seeing the imposing structure emerge from between the trees of the Surrey Hills. It was an isolated property, guarded by high, ivy-covered walls, smoked glass windows, and a sense of neglect that contradicted its impeccable state of preservation. As the cab pulled away down the stone drive, Clara adjusted the white coat inside her bag. She wouldn't need it today. This was just a preliminary visit. The home care service she worked for had been discreet about the patient. A reclusive gentleman with a psychiatric history who requires monitoring. It was the kind of vague description that, in her 7 years of palliative nursing, always concealed complex stories and dysfunctional families. At 27, Clara carried a serenity in her gaze that belied her youth. Having graduated with honours from King's College London, she had specialised in palliative care not by accident, but by a choice born of pain. She preferred the silence of convalescent rooms, the slow pace of the elderly, the respectful intimacy with those who are departing. Her colleagues said she had a knack for death, a tasteless joke she never contested. There was some truth to it. The intercom beside the main gate remained silent when she pressed the button. Seconds later, cameras adjusted their focus on her face, and the gate slid open without a sound. A middle-aged black woman, wearing an impeccably pressed uniform, awaited her at the entrance. She didn't smile, nor did she extend a hand. She merely offered a nod. Ms. Regina Holloway, the housekeeper, she introduced herself in a monotone voice. Follow me, please. The manor's interior was a disconcerting mix of contemporary luxury and vestiges of an opulent past. Modern artworks shared space with relics that seemed to have been brought from Georgian manors. The scent was of polished wood, old books, and something else, a chemical hospital-like aroma that Clara recognized immediately. I thought I would be meeting the patient today, Clara commented, as she followed Regina down a corridor decorated with black and white photographs of Scottish landscapes. No people in the photos, no faces, just forests, deserted beaches, empty mountains. Dr. Ashworth will determine when you meet, Regina replied without turning around. Today you will only get to know the house, its facilities, and your duties. Clara frowned. Dr. Ashworth? I thought he was the patient. Regina stopped abruptly, turning with an expression that blended irritation and caution. Dr. Dimitri Ashworth is the son. The patient is his father, Mr. Augustus Ashworth, but it is Dr. Dimitri who determines everything related to his father's care. Something in the way Regina pronounced that name sent a shiver down Clara's spine. Dimitri Ashworth. Why did that name sound familiar? She couldn't place where she might have heard it. The apartment where you'll be staying, Regina indicated a dark wooden door at the end of the corridor. Your things have already been brought from the hotel. My things, but I haven't confirmed I'll take the job yet. I was just... Dr. Dimitri presumed you would accept. It wasn't an explanation. It was a statement of fact. The apartment was, in fact, a spacious suite with its own living room, a marble bathroom, and a small balcony overlooking the property's gardens. Far too luxurious for an on-duty nurse. On the walls, more photographs of empty landscapes. On the bedside table, a book of poems by Christina Rossetti, open to the exact page where Clara had left off reading the previous night in her flat in Clapham. The shock must have been visible on her face because Regina commented, Dr. Dimitri likes to get to know the people he works with. It's part of the process. Process? What process? And how did he? Your meals will be served at 8, noon, and 7 in the evening. The shift with Mr. Augustus is from 9 to 5 with 2 breaks. There is a night nurse, but you will not see her. Dr. Isadora handles the night shift. Regina spoke as if reciting a memorized script. In the wardrobe you will find suitable uniforms. Dr. Dimitri prefers that staff wear the clothing provided by the house. When Regina left, closing the door silently, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, trying to organize her thoughts. What was wrong with this house? How had someone entered her flat, checked her reading, and packed her things? She reached for her mobile to call her supervisor at the home care service, but there was no signal. The landline beside the bed had a dial tone, but when she tried an outside line, a recording informed her, "External calls are blocked for this extension." The feeling of being trapped should have alarmed her more. It should have made her grab her bag and demand to be taken away immediately. But there was something about this place, about this mystery, that touched a part of Clara she herself didn't know. A curiosity that went beyond the rational. There was also the money. The salary offered was 5 times her normal income. Money that could help her mother with her cancer treatment in Manchester. 2 soft knocks on the door interrupted her thoughts. It wasn't Regina, but a tall, middle-aged black man wearing a chauffeur's uniform. "Miss Sterling, Dr. Dimitri requests your presence in the laboratory. Please come with me." The laboratory was in the manor's basement, accessible by an elevator for which only the chauffeur, who introduced himself as George, had the key. During the descent, Clara noticed there were only 2 buttons, G for ground and L for laboratory. "Is Mr. Augustus on the ground floor?" she asked, trying to establish some communication. George kept his eyes fixed on the elevator door. "Dr. Dimitri will explain everything." The laboratory was a complete surprise. While the manor blended antiques with modernity, this environment was entirely futuristic. White walls, state-of-the-art medical equipment, computer screens displaying biometric data, and in the center an oval glass chamber reminiscent of a hibernation pod from a science fiction film. "Impressive, isn't it?" The deep voice came from a corner of the room Clara hadn't noticed. A tall man emerged from the shadows, wearing a white lab coat over a black shirt. He was not the frail, elderly man she had expected to meet. Dimitri. Ashworth appeared to be around 40, with an athletic physique evident even under the coat, tanned skin, short-cropped black hair, and eyes that. The eyes were the most striking feature, dark, deep, piercing, as if they could see right through her. On his face, a thin scar cut across his left eyebrow to the top of his cheekbone. "Dr. Ashworth, I presume," Clara said, extending her hand. Professionally, trying to ignore the sudden racing of her heart. "Just Dimitri." He didn't take her hand, merely observed her with a disconcerting intensity. "You don't look like your photo on the CV." "The photo is 4 years old." "That's not it." Dimitri moved through the lab with the grace of a predator, picking up an electronic clipboard. "You cut your hair. In the photo it's shoulder length, now it's short. Why?" The question caught her off guard. "It's more practical for work." A lie. Dimitri faced her directly, a half-smile playing on his lips. "You cut it after someone died." A symbolic change, a form of mourning. Clara felt her body go cold. How could he know? She had cut her hair right after the death of Matthew, her 32-year-old patient with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Matthew, whom she had cared for 6 months. Matthew, for whom she had developed feelings that crossed the professional barrier. Matthew, who had died holding her hand, whispering words she tried to forget. "I'm here to meet Mr. Augustus Ashworth." Clara changed the subject, keeping her voice steady despite the internal tremor. "The housekeeper mentioned he would be my patient." Dimitri studied her for a moment as if deciding how much to reveal. "Augustus Ashworth died 12 years ago," he said finally, watching her reaction. "I don't understand. If he's dead, who needs palliative care here?" "I do." Dimitri gestured toward the glass chamber. "Or rather, this project needs your expertise on the process of dying." He led her around the room, explaining equipment and showing data on holographic displays. Clara recognized brainwave graphs, complex chemical analyses, and images that looked like functional magnetic resonance imaging of a brain. "I'm a neuropharmacologist," Dimitri explained, "or I was until my company, Ashworth Pharma, was shut down by the government after complications with an experimental drug. Brain erase." The words slipped from Clara's mouth before she could stop them. That's what she remembered. The scandal had been massive in scientific circles 7 years ago, a drug that promised to treat PTSD by selectively erasing traumatic memories. Preliminary trials were promising, but in the final phase, several patients developed psychosis and generalized amnesia. One of them, the creator's own fiancée, had committed suicide. The creator, Dmitri Ashworth, had disappeared after the scandal, presumed dead as well. But he was here, alive, in front of her. "So you know my story." It wasn't a question. Or the version they told of it. You're supposed to be dead." To the world I am, Dmitri moved closer, invading her personal space. Up close she could smell him, a mix of expensive aftershave and something chemical, medicinal. "The question, Nurse Sterling, is whether you can work with a ghost. I don't understand what you want from me. I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm just a nurse specializing in palliative care." "Precisely." Dmitri touched a screen and images of terminal patients appeared. "You have experience with something that intrigues me, the fine line between consciousness and its disappearance, the exact moment when someone ceases to be who they are." A chill ran down Clara's spine. "You're talking about death. I'm talking about identity." Dmitri switched off the screens with a gesture. Brain erase was misunderstood. It wasn't just a drug to erase traumatic memories. It was a tool to reinvent the self, to allow people trapped in cycles of trauma to start over. "People like you?" The audacious question surprised them both. Dmitri observed her with new interest, as if re-evaluating his choice to hire her. "People like all of us," he replied finally. "We all carry invisible scars, don't we, Nurse Sterling? How even you, with your serene air and sad eyes." The comment hit Clara like a physical blow. She was used to being the observer, not the observed. The invisible nurse who entered rooms, administered medication, offered comfort, and left without a trace. But under Dmitri's intense gaze, she felt exposed, as if he could see through her carefully constructed layers. "You still haven't told me what you expect me to do here," she insisted, trying to regain control of the situation. "I want you to document the process," Dmitri explained, walking toward the glass chamber. "I'm in the final testing phase of the new version of brain erase, a version that not only selectively erases memories, but allows for their transfer and preservation." "Transfer? To where?" "To a compatible recipient." He touched the glass of the chamber almost affectionately. "Memories are not just data, Nurse Sterling. They are living experiences. Energy. When we erase a memory, that energy doesn't just disappear. It can be channeled, preserved, and eventually restored or transferred." "That's impossible." Clara looked around, suddenly aware that she was alone with a man the world considered dead, discussing a technology that sounded like science fiction. "And unethical. You're talking about unapproved human experimentation." "I'm talking about saving lives." Dmitri's voice hardened. "You, better than anyone, should know what guilt and trauma can do to a person. How they can corrode the soul day after day until nothing is left but an empty shell." The comment struck a nerve. Clara knew that feeling. The guilt she carried after Matthew's death, the patient she had kissed the night before he died, the man to whom she had promised she would always be by his side, even knowing it was an impossible promise to keep. The guilt that had kept her trapped in a state of emotional and physical celibacy ever since, unable to allow herself any true intimacy. "Why me?" she asked finally. "There are thousands of nurses with more experience." "Because you understand death not just as a medical event, but as a transition." Dmitri picked up the electronic clipboard again, showing her the screen. It was her specialization dissertation, Consciousness at the Threshold, Terminal Patients' Perceptions of the Transition from Life to Death. "How do you have access to this?" "I have access to everything about you, Clara." The way he said her first name with an intimacy, as if he'd known her for years, sent a shiver down her spine. "I know about the patient you lost. I know about your mother with cancer in Manchester. I even know about the poems you write in your journal, the green-covered one you keep under your bed." Clara felt her legs weaken. No one knew about her journal. No one. "What are you?" she whispered, taking a step back. "I am someone who has seen the other side," Dmitri replied, his eyes fixed on hers. "Someone who died and came back. And now I need your help to complete my research. And if I refuse, You won't. There was absolute certainty in his voice. You're here because a part of you recognizes something in me. Something that also exists in you. Before Clara could respond, an alarm sounded in the lab. Dimitri quickly consulted one of the monitors and frowned. We'll have to finish this conversation later. For now, I need you to go to your room and remain there until dinner. George will escort you. As if summoned, the silent chauffeur appeared at the laboratory door. Clara looked one last time at Dimitri, at the glass chamber, at the monitors displaying unknown brainwaves. Something was deeply wrong with this house, with this man. Logic screamed for her to flee immediately. But there was another voice, softer and more insistent, whispering that she needed to stay. That there was a purpose to her meeting Dimitri Ashworth. That somehow, inexplicably, their destinies were intertwined. Until dinner, Nurse Sterling, Dimitri dismissed her with a gesture, already absorbed in his monitors. As the elevator ascended, Clara noticed George avoiding her gaze. "What's wrong with this house?" she asked impulsively. The chauffeur remained silent for a few seconds. As the elevator doors were about to open, he finally spoke, so quietly she almost didn't hear. "Don't listen to the music at night." Before she could ask what he meant, George quickly escorted her to her room and departed. Clara was left alone, with more questions than when she had arrived. She went to the window, observing the dense forest that surrounded the property. The London sky, always polluted, seemed different from here, from the Surrey hills. Closer, more menacing. The clouds formed patterns that seemed to watch her. In the reflection of the glass, for a fleeting moment, Clara thought she saw someone behind her, a pale female figure with long hair. She spun around, but the room was empty. In the ensuing silence, she realized she had made her decision before she had even arrived at this house. She would stay. She would find out what Dimitri Ashworth was really doing. And more importantly, she would find out why she felt this strange familiarity with a man she had never seen before. Or at least, she believed she had never seen. As night fell on Ashworth Manor, Clara tried to focus on the book of Christina Rossetti poems, the same one that had been on her bedside table. The same page, as if someone knew exactly where she had stopped. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Well, yes, to the very end. Will the day's journey take the whole long day, from morn to night, my friend? The verses seemed to speak directly about Dimitri, about herself. 3 knocks on the door announced dinner. Clara expected to find Regina or George, but the person who entered pushing a dinner trolley was Dimitri Ashworth himself, now without the lab coat, wearing only the black shirt and dark dress trousers. "I thought we should continue our conversation," he said, pouring red wine into 2 crystal glasses, "in a less clinical setting." Clara watched as he arranged the dishes on the small table near the balcony. The food looked like it came from a Michelin-starred restaurant: risotto with prawns and spices, artisan bread, a small elaborate salad. "Do you usually dine with all the nurses you hire?" she asked, keeping her distance. "You're not just any nurse," Dimitri replied simply, indicating a chair for her to sit. "And I'm not trying to seduce you, if that's what you're thinking." "I wasn't thinking that." A lie. His masculine presence, combined with the romantic setting of the dinner, had evoked that very thought. "I lie," Dimitri corrected himself, an enigmatic smile on his face as he sat opposite her. "I am trying to seduce you, but not in the way you imagine. I want to seduce your mind, your scientific curiosity, for your unapproved and potentially fatal experiment, for a revolution in how we treat trauma and identity." Dimitri tasted the wine, his eyes never leaving hers. "Have you ever wondered, Nurse Sterling, what it would be like to completely forget something painful? Not just suppress or process it, but truly erase it like deleting a file? Our experiences, even the painful ones, define us," Clara argued, reluctantly tasting the food, which was delicious. "Erasing them would be losing a part of who we are. And what if that part is poisoning the whole?" Dimitri leaned forward, intense. "What if a single traumatic memory is contaminating all the others, preventing you from living, from loving, from simply existing without pain?" The question hit Clara more deeply than she wanted to admit. She thought of Matthew, the kiss, the promise, the guilt she carried. The way that experience had closed her off to any romantic or sexual possibility since. How a single event had redefined her entire emotional life. "You still haven't explained how I fit into this." She deflected, trying to regain control of the conversation. "I need someone who understands the transition." Dmitri explained, his dark eyes reflecting the soft light of the room. Someone who has accompanied people crossing the threshold of consciousness. Death and forgetting have more in common than one might think. And what exactly do you expect me to do? Monitor, document, observe. He paused, taking another sip of wine. And eventually participate. Participate how? Before Dmitri could answer, a distant sound interrupted their conversation. Notes from a piano, soft, melancholic, coming from somewhere in the manor. A melody Clara didn't recognize, but which sounded strangely familiar, like a half-forgotten lullaby. The effect on Dmitri was immediate. His entire body tensed, his gaze hardened, and for a moment something wild and frightening crossed his face. "You need to go now," he said abruptly, standing up. "We have a situation that requires my attention." "The music," Clara began, remembering George's warning. "It's nothing." Dmitri quickly collected the plates, leaving only the wine glasses. "Just an automated system that sometimes malfunctions. We'll talk more tomorrow." He moved toward the door, but before leaving he turned to Clara with a complex expression, a mix of urgency and something that looked almost like fear. "Lock your door, and no matter what you hear tonight, do not leave this room." When the door closed behind him, Clara remained motionless, the distant sound of the piano still audible, now accompanied by something else, a sound that could have been a moan, a lament or a muffled scream. In her chest, her heart beat rapidly, not just with fear, but with a more complex emotion, a mixture of dread and fascination. Somewhere deep in her mind, an inexplicable certainty was forming. She knew that music. She knew this house. Somehow, impossibly, she knew Dmitri Ashworth. And as the night deepened over the isolated manor in the Surrey Hills, Clara Sterling knew she had crossed a threshold, not between life and death, like her patients, but between her previous, safe, predictable life and something new, dangerous, and irresistible that awaited her in the days to come. Dawn arrived slowly at Ashworth Manor, but Clara had been awake for hours. Sleep had not come easily the previous night, not with that piano music playing intermittently, like a ghostly call echoing through the corridors. 3 times the melody was interrupted by sounds she couldn't identify, something between a cry of pain and a lament of despair. And at some point around 3 in the morning, the old clock in the library had chimed 3 times, though Clara could have sworn that when she passed it during the day, its hands were stopped. Sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed in the white uniform provided by the house, an ensemble that inexplicably fit her body perfectly, Clara watched the sunrise through the window. The manor seemed different in the nascent light, less menacing, more like a melancholic relic of a past that refused to die. A soft knock on the door announced Regina, the housekeeper, bringing a tray with breakfast. Her movements were mechanical, her eyes avoiding direct contact. "Dr. Dmitri requests your presence in the laboratory at 9 o'clock, she informed, placing the tray on the table. "Until then, feel free to explore the grounds. There is a library on the 2nd floor that might interest you." Clara noticed a subtle change in the housekeeper, a less pronounced tension, as if the daylight brought some security. "Regina, who plays the piano during the night." The tray trembled slightly in the housekeeper's hands. "No one plays the piano here, Miss Sterling. Perhaps the wind in the old pipes." "Pipes don't play Chopin," Clara replied, finally recognizing the melody she had heard. It was the Nocturne in E-flat major. Someone was playing it. A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Regina looked directly into Clara's eyes, something breaking in her professional facade. "There are things in this house that should not be questioned," she said, lowering her voice. "If you wish to stay, accept this as a rule. What happens during the night belongs to the night." Before Clara could insist, Regina left quickly, closing the door behind her. After breakfast, Clara decided to explore the manor. The library mentioned by Regina occupied almost the entire 2nd floor, an impressive octagonal room with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books in various languages. In the center, a large circular dark wood table displayed open books on neuroscience, psychological trauma, and, surprisingly, literature on near-death experiences. The old clock she imagined she had heard during the night was there, an imposing grandfather clock, apparently stopped at 3:03. As she approached to examine it, a voice startled her. "It's a Bolvilla, 19th century. Here it belonged to the royal family." Clara turned to find Dimitri Ashworth watching her from the library entrance. Unlike the previous night, he looked exhausted. Dark circles marked his face and there was a slight tremor in his hands. "Rough night?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral, professional. A tired smile crossed his face. "You could say that." Dimitri approached, stopping beside the clock. For a moment he seemed lost in thought, as if the object awakened specific memories. His fingers delicately traced the carved wood. "This clock stopped at the exact moment, Isadora." He paused, reconsidering. "At the moment of the accident. We could never get it to work again." "Isadora, your fiancé. That was a long time ago." Dimitri looked away as if the subject were too painful. "Today I have something important to show you. Are you ready to learn the true purpose of your work here?" Clara nodded, although ready was the last word she would use to describe how she felt. The laboratory seemed different during the day. Brighter lights revealed details that had gone unnoticed the day before, framed photographs of research teams, patent certificates, and in a less illuminated corner, what appeared to be a photograph of Dimitri with a young woman with long dark hair. The same woman Clara thought she had seen reflected in her window. "Brain Erase 2.0 is not just a drug," Dimitri explained as he activated several pieces of equipment. "It's a complex procedure that combines brain chemistry, magnetic stimulation, and real-time neural mapping." On one of the screens, Clara saw what looked like a three-dimensional reconstruction of a human brain, with colored areas pulsing in distinct patterns. "This is my brain," Dimitri explained, observing the fascination on her face. "More specifically, it's a map of my traumatic memories." The intense red areas seemed concentrated in the temporal lobe and parts of the limbic system, regions associated with emotional memory. Clara, though not a neuroscientist, had studied enough about the brain to understand the basics. "Memories aren't stored in specific locations in the brain," she commented. "They're distributed networks." "Excellent observation," Dimitri smiled, genuinely impressed. "And that's exactly why the first trials of brain erase failed. We tried to erase them punctually, like removing a stain from fabric. The result was catastrophic." He slid a finger across the screen, and the image changed to show another brain, with radically different patterns, dark areas like holes, scattered throughout the structure. This was Isadora's brain, after the administration of the original drug. Dimitri's voice faltered slightly. "As you can see, the damage was extensive. Instead of erasing specific memories, the original compound corrupted entire networks, leading to the disintegration of her personality." "That's..." Clara searched for the right word. "Devastating. Yes, and my fault." Dimitri turned off that specific screen as if he couldn't bear to look at it for long. "But the new version works differently. Instead of trying to erase memories, we isolate and transfer them." "Transfer them where?" Dimitri walked to the oval glass chamber that had intrigued Clara the day before. "To a temporary receptacle, say a matrix of organic liquid crystals, capable of holding the electrochemical charge of memories for up to 72 hours. He activated the chamber, which began to emit a bluish glow. Inside, Clara could see a thick, almost gelatinous fluid circulating slowly. Within this solution are nanoparticles that function as temporary receptors. They capture the electrochemical pattern of specific memories and keep them intact. And then, what happens to these memories? Dimitri studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much more he could reveal. They can be returned to the original host after a period of emotional detoxification, or they can be transferred to a compatible host. He paused significantly. Or they can be preserved indefinitely. "This sounds like something out of science fiction," Clara commented, unable to hide her skepticism. "Memories aren't just electrical data. They are complex contextual experiences integrated into our identity. And what if I told you I've already performed this transfer successfully?" Dimitri approached her, entering her personal space, his dark hypnotic eyes fixed on hers. "What if I told you that you yourself have already participated in this process, Nurse Sterling?" A shiver ran down Clara's spine. "That's impossible. I've never been here before. I've never met you before. Are you sure?" Dimitri's voice was almost a whisper now. He was so close she could feel the heat emanating from his body. "Don't you feel any familiarity?" Any déjà vu since you arrived at this house? Clara wanted to back away, but something kept her rooted to that spot, to that moment. Because he was right. There was something familiar about all of it. The house, the piano music, Dimitri, like a memory of a dream that dissipates upon waking. "What have you done to me?" she whispered, a mix of fear and fascination in her voice. "Nothing you didn't consent to." Dimitri stepped back slightly, giving her room to breathe. At least not this time. Before Clara could process what that meant, an alarm sounded on one of the computers. Dimitri consulted it quickly, his expression shifting to intense concern. "We need to move up the schedule," he said, more to himself than to her. "The readings are unstable. The reservoir is reaching its limit." "What reservoir? What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, Dimitri pressed a button on a nearby console. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden door. "Come with me," he said, his tone now urgent. "It's time for you to know the truth about why you're here." The passage led to a narrow corridor lit by bluish emergency lights. Clara followed Dimitri, her mind in turmoil. Part of her screamed to run, to leave this manor and never look back. But another part, the part that had always drawn her to terminal patience, to the limits of life, compelled her to move forward, to discover what lay beyond that door. The corridor ended in a circular room, very different from the main laboratory. While the lab was all cutting-edge technology, this environment seemed like a cross between a hospital room and a shrine. The walls were white, but covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all showing the same woman, the young dark-haired woman from the photo with Dimitri, in different moments and places, Isadora. In the center of the room, on a hospital bed adapted with advanced monitoring equipment, was a figure that made Clara freeze. A woman, alive, breathing with the help of machines, but in a state that Clara recognized well from her work with terminal patients, deep catatonia. Her hair, once dark in the photos, was now completely white. Her face, though still young, had an ethereal quality, as if she were already partially in another world. "Isadora," Clara whispered, her medical training automatically assessing the vital signs on the monitors, stable but minimal. "Yes, my Isadora." Dimitri's voice was laden with emotion, pain, guilt, love, all mixed together. "She didn't die that day as the world believes, but she didn't completely survive either." He approached the bed, gently touching the inert woman's face. The gesture was one of indescribable tenderness. "The original brain erase destroyed almost all of her consciousness," he explained, without taking his eyes off Isadora. "But some islands of memory remained intact. Fragments, moments, not enough to restore her personality, but enough to preserve her." Clara watched the scene with a lump in her throat. There was something profoundly disturbing, yet painfully beautiful in Dimitri's devotion. He had created a shrine for a woman who existed only as an echo of herself. "For 7 years I have worked to rebuild her," Dimitri continued. "To recover every fragment of her consciousness, strengthen what remains, and eventually bring her back." "That's impossible," Clara murmured, her professional side emerging. "Brain damage of that level is irreversible. You're prolonging her suffering." "She is not suffering," Dimitri retorted, a hint of anger in his voice. "She is waiting." It was then that Clara noticed something strange. Beside Isadora's bed was a small piano, an old elegant instrument apparently well maintained. "This is where the music comes from," she deduced. "But who plays?" Dimitri followed her gaze, a complex expression crossing his face. "Sometimes during the night Isadora partially awakens, not fully conscious but active, and she plays. Always the same piece, the Chopin nocturne that was our song. How is that possible if she's in a catatonic state? Muscle memory. The music is so deeply rooted in her being that it survived even when everything else was destroyed." Dimitri looked at the piano with a mixture of hope and sadness. "That's why I know she's still in there somewhere. And that's why I need you." "What do I have to do with this?" Clara asked, though a growing dread already suggested the answer. "You have the neural compatibility we need." Dimitri turned to her, his eyes suddenly intense. "Your brain pattern is remarkably similar to Isadora's. Of all the candidates we tested, you are the one with the greatest potential as a recipient." The reality of the situation hit Clara like a physical blow. "You want to transfer her memories to me? Is that why you brought me here?" "Not all of her memories," Dimitri clarified quickly. Just key fragments. Anchor points that can help stabilize what's left of her. This is madness, Clara backed away, horrified. It's unethical, it's dangerous, it's the only chance to save her. Dimitri's voice broke. And you've agreed before. What? This isn't the first time you've been here, Clara. Dimitri approached again, his eyes never leaving hers. This is the 5th time we've hired you. The 5th time we brought you to this house. The 5th time you've learned the truth. The world seemed to spin around Clara. She leaned against the wall to keep from falling. Impossible. I would remember. Not if your memories of these periods were also isolated and stored. Dimitri pointed to a series of small, crystalline containers on a shelf on the wall, each holding a faintly glowing blue substance. Your memories from each cycle are here, preserved, protected. Why wouldn't I remember this? Why would I agree and then forget? Because each time we try, the process is partially successful, but your brain begins to reject the foreign memories. It's like an organ transplant. Eventually, the body recognizes the presence of something non-self and reacts. Dimitri glanced at the monitors beside Isadora's bed. When that happens, we have to reverse everything. Remove the transferred memories. Remove your own memories of the process and start over. A complete reset. Clara's mind worked frantically, trying to process it all. It was absurd, impossible, and yet it explained the feeling of familiarity, the déjà vu, the way the house seemed to know her, the way Dimitri seemed to know her. All those times she hesitated, unable to form the question she really wanted to ask. Dimitri seemed to understand anyway. A sad smile touched his lips. Yes, Clara, in each cycle you and I grow closer. In each cycle you choose to help. In each cycle, he paused, his eyes revealing an unexpected vulnerability. In each cycle I fall in love with you all over again. And you with me. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy, laden with implications. Clara felt something inside her respond to his words. Not her mind, which was still screaming in protest, but something deeper, more primal. Her body recognized the truth before her consciousness could process it. Prove it, she challenged, her voice trembling. Prove that I've been here before. Without a word, Dimitri went to a nearby console and entered a code. A screen on the wall lit up showing security footage. In it, Clara saw herself with slightly longer hair, walking through the same corridors of the manor. Talking with Dimitri in the laboratory, sitting by Isadora's bed, holding her hand. And in the final sequence, she and Dimitri in an intimate embrace, their lips joined in a passionate kiss. That was 8 months ago, Dimitri explained softly. In the last cycle. Clara watched the images, unable to look away. It was her, undeniably her, living a life she had no memory of living. Why me? She asked finally, her voice barely audible. Of all the people in the world. Initially, it was just neural compatibility, Dimitri admitted. But now, he hesitated as if the next words were difficult to say. Now I think it's something more. Something I can't explain scientifically. As if somehow you and Isadora and I are connected by something beyond science. The silence that followed was broken only by the steady beeping of Isadora's monitors. Clara looked at the woman in the bed, an empty shell of what was once a person. She looked at Dimitri, whose eyes pleaded for understanding, for acceptance, and she looked at herself on the screen, a version of herself who loved this man, who had chosen to help him in his impossible mission. I need time, she said finally, to process all of this. Of course, Dimitri nodded, understanding. But we don't have much. Isadora's condition is deteriorating. The memory fragments we've managed to preserve are becoming unstable. If we don't act soon... I understand the urgency, Clara cut him off. But I won't make a decision like this without thinking carefully. Fair. Dimitri moved away from Isadora, heading for the door. Let's let her rest. As they left the room, Clara glanced back one last time. For an instant, she had the impression that Isadora's eyes had opened just for a second and were watching her. But when she blinked, the woman in the bed was as still as before. Back in the main laboratory, Dimitri seemed calmer, more controlled. There's something else I need to show you, he said, guiding her to a different workstation. Something that might help you better understand what we're trying to do. He activated a screen that showed a series of brainwaves, rhythmic patterns that Clara recognized as electroencephalographic activity. These are your brain patterns, he explained. Recorded when you arrived yesterday. He touched the screen and a second set of waves appeared, superimposed on the first. The patterns were remarkably similar, with some subtle variations. And these are Isadora's patterns, recorded before the accident. A third set of waves appeared, more chaotic, fragmented, but still with recognizable elements from the other two patterns. And these are her patterns now. As you can see, there's a resonance between you, a compatibility we rarely find. Clara studied the graphs, her scientific training battling her disbelief. Even if this is possible, she argued, even if I agree, what would happen next? I'd receive fragments of her memories, and then what? Would that bring her back? Dmitri hesitated before answering, and Clara realized there was more to the story than he was revealing. The theory is that if we can anchor key memories in a compatible brain, yours, we can use them as a template to rebuild the connections in her brain. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's like having a secure backup while we rebuild the original system. But what would that involve exactly? I'd live with another person's memories in my head. Memories of you? With her? Only temporarily. Once the reconstruction process is complete, we can extract the memories again and return them to Isadora. And I'd go back to normal? Forget all of this. Something in Dmitri's expression made Clara doubt. Not completely, he admitted. There would be residue, echoes, sensations without specific context, like the déjà vu I've been feeling since I arrived. Exactly. Dmitri moved closer, his presence simultaneously comforting and unsettling. Clara, I know it's a lot to process. I know it sounds insane, but I've seen it work, partially at least. In each cycle, we managed to recover more of Isadora, rebuild more of her consciousness. And in each cycle, what happens to me? To us? The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Dmitri held her gaze, and for the first time, Clara saw genuine vulnerability in those dark eyes. In each cycle, he answered softly, we meet. We get to know each other. We grow close. And yes, we fall in love. And then you erase my memories and we start all over. Not by choice, but by medical necessity, Dmitri emphasized. When the process reaches a critical point, your brain begins to reject the memories. You start having psychotic episodes, severe dissociation. To save you, we have to reverse everything. So it's an endless cycle? We fall in love, try to save Isadora, fail, you erase my memory and we start over? Dmitri looked away for the first time. It was, but this time I believe we found the solution. Before he could elaborate, the alarm on his watch sounded. I need to check the systems, he explained. And you need time to think. Can we continue this conversation over dinner? Clara nodded silently. As she watched Dmitri return to his work, a storm of conflicting emotions raged within her. Fear, confusion, disbelief, but also undeniably an almost magnetic curiosity. And something else, something she hesitated to name, but which grew with every moment spent in his presence. Attraction. Later, in her room, Clara tried to organize her thoughts. The story was absurd. Secret neural experiments, memory transfers, repeated cycles of romance and forgetting. It was the plot of a science fiction movie, not something that happened in real life. And yet the evidence was hard to deny. The recording showing her in the manor months ago. The way the house seemed to know her. The way Regina and George treated her with a veiled familiarity. The persistent déjà vu. And, most disturbingly, the way her body responded to Dmitri's presence. Not like a stranger, but like someone familiar, intimate. There was also Isadora. The catatonic woman the world believed to be dead, kept alive by a combination of cutting-edge technology and Dmitri's unwavering devotion. There was something simultaneously morbid and romantic about it, a love story taken to the extreme, to the brink of madness. As the sun began to set, tinting the room with orange hues, Clara made her decision. She couldn't just walk away now. She needed to understand what had happened, what was happening to her, to them. She went to the wardrobe where Regina had said she would find suitable clothing. Instead of the white uniforms, she found elegant dresses, designer casual wear, all in her exact size. As if they were hers. As if they had been chosen for her, or by her in a life she didn't remember living. She chose a simple but elegant dark blue dress. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she had another flash of déjà vu, as if she had been in this very room wearing this very dress, preparing for dinner with Dimitri Ashworth. Dinner was served on the terrace under a starry sky rarely seen in London. The table was impeccably set, with candles, flowers, and an already opened bottle of red wine. Dimitri was waiting for her, dressed in a dark shirt and dress trousers. He seemed more relaxed than Clara had seen him so far. "You look beautiful," he commented as she approached, his eyes scanning her with an admiration he didn't try to hide. "This dress," Clara said, sitting in the chair he pulled out for her. "I've worn it before, haven't I?" A melancholic smile touched Dimitri's lips. "The first time we had dinner together, in the second cycle. You chose it yourself, during a trip to Selfridge's. We went together? In public?" "With certain precautions. I can't be recognized, obviously." He poured wine for both of them. "That time, we got further in the process than in any other cycle. You remained stable for almost 3 weeks after the initial memory transfer." Clara tasted the wine, an exceptional Argentinian Malbec. "And then? Then your brain began to reject the foreign memories. You started having lapses, confusion, episodes of depersonalization." Dimitri paused, the pain evident on his face. "In the 3rd week, you woke up in the middle of the night convinced you were Isadora. It was devastating for both of us." The dinner proceeded with Dimitri revealing more details about the previous cycles, how in each one they developed a connection that went beyond the professional, how in each one Clara eventually agreed to participate in the experiment, and how invariably the process would fail, forcing them to erase her memories and start over. "Don't you fear we're trapped in this cycle forever?" Clara asked, the wine and the intimacy of the situation breaking down her last reservations. "Falling in love, failing, forgetting, starting over. Every day." Dimitri covered her hand with his on the table, the contact sending an electric current through Clara's body. "But I also have hope. Each cycle brings us more knowledge, more data. And each cycle," he hesitated, his intense eyes fixed on hers, "brings us closer, as if our souls recognize each other, even when our minds forget." There was a raw sincerity in his words that would disarm even the most entrenched skepticism. Clara felt something inside her respond to this sincerity, a recognition, a longing as if a dormant part of herself were awakening. "And if I agree," she whispered, "if I participate in this experiment, what exactly would happen?" "The process has 3 phases, Dimitri explained, his voice taking on a more clinical tone, though his eyes remained intense. "In the first phase, we do a detailed mapping of your brain, all your memories, emotions, cognitive patterns. This serves as a baseline and a safeguard. A backup." "Exactly." Dimitri gently squeezed her hand. "In the second phase, we transfer selected fragments of Isadora's memories, key moments, emotional anchors, memories fundamental to her identity. In this phase, you would experience flashes of memories that are not yours, decontextualized sensations, seemingly uncaused emotions." "And the third phase?" Dimitri hesitated. "In the third phase, we use your mind as a template to rebuild Isadora's. It's the most delicate phase and the one that, until now, has always failed." A disturbing thought occurred to Clara. "You said my brain pattern is compatible with hers, that we're similar. Doesn't that mean that you chose me because I'm like her, because I'm a convenient substitute?" The question hung between them, heavy and painful. Dimitri put down his wine, his face suddenly serious. "In the first cycles, yes," he admitted with brutal honesty. "Your neurological compatibility was the only criterion. I saw you as a tool, a means to an end." The confession hurt more than Clara had expected. "But then," Dimitri continued, his voice softening, "then I got to know you. The real you, not just your compatibility with Isadora, but everything that you are. Your compassion, your strength, your unique way of seeing the world." His eyes met hers, intense and vulnerable. "And in each cycle, I discovered something new, something deeper in you to love." "Love?" Clara repeated the word, testing it, feeling its weight. "Yes, Clara, love." Dimitri stood up, walking around the table until he was beside her. "And the truth is, I'm now torn in a way I never imagined possible. Torn between my devotion to Isadora and my feelings for you. Between the past I'm trying to recover and the future I can't ignore." He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. The gesture was simultaneously humble and intense, a powerful man making himself vulnerable by choice. "I can't abandon Isadora," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I can't just let her go. The guilt for what I did to her would consume me. But I also can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just part of the process." Clara felt her breath quicken, her heart beating against her chest as if it wanted to escape. There was a part of her, the rational part, the professional nurse, that screamed this was madness, manipulation, an ethically compromised situation. But there was another part, a deeper, more primitive part, that responded to his touch, to his gaze, as if her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. "Show me," she whispered, surprised at her own boldness. "Show me what it was like between us and before." Dimitri's expression shifted subtly, surprise followed by an intensity that made Clara tremble. Slowly, as if afraid of breaking her, he rose, gently pulling her to her feet in front of him. Their bodies were close, almost touching. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice deep, laden with meaning. Clara wasn't sure, not rationally, but something beyond reason was guiding her now. She nodded silently. Dimitri raised a hand, touching her face with reverence. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, his thumb stroking her lower lip with a familiarity that should have been unsettling, but somehow felt right. When their lips met, it wasn't like a first kiss. It was a reunion. Clara's arms wrapped around his neck instinctively, her body pressing against his as if it were its natural place. Dimitri held her by the waist, his embrace simultaneously protective and possessive. The kiss deepened, crossing the barrier from polite to the territory of pure desire. There was a hunger between them, a need that transcended the logic of first encounters. It was as if their bodies remembered each other, even when their minds did not. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Clara saw in Dimitri's eyes the same whirlwind of emotions she felt: desire, confusion, fear, hope. "This," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "This is real. Clara, it's not the experiment. It's not the process. It's you and me finding each other again, as we always do." In that moment, as the London night spread around them, and the world beyond the walls of Ashworth Manor seemed distant and irrelevant, Clara made her decision. Her decision that was not entirely rational, not entirely based on facts, but came from a deeper, more primordial place. "I'll help," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her body. "I'll participate in the experiment." Dimitri's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and caution. "Are you sure?" "After what happened in the previous cycles." "No," Clara admitted. "I'm not sure of anything. But I know I can't just walk away now. Not when I feel there's something bigger happening here. Something I don't fully understand, but that somehow involves me deeply." Dimitri hugged her then, an embrace that spoke of relief, gratitude, and promise. When he pulled away, there was a new determination in his eyes. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll begin tomorrow with the first phase." As the night progressed and they returned to the laboratory, now with a new intimacy between them, Clara couldn't help but notice how the distant sound of the piano seemed clearer, more present, as if Isadora somehow knew what was about to happen. And somewhere in the depths of the manor, an old clock that never worked chimed 3 times, at exactly 3:03 in the morning. The laboratory seemed different that morning, colder, more clinical, despite the same high-tech equipment Clara had seen before. Perhaps it was the finality that now permeated the air, the certainty that something irreversible was about to happen. Clara was seated in a specially designed reclining chair, similar to a dentist's chair, but surrounded by neural monitoring equipment. Electrodes were carefully placed at strategic points on her scalp, while Dimitri checked the final adjustments on the monitors. Regina, the housekeeper, was present in the lab for the first time, silently arranging trays with syringes and vials of medication. "Remember," Dimitri explained, his voice calm and professional, though his eyes betrayed the tension he felt. "Phase 1 is just mapping. You won't feel anything beyond a slight hum. It's like a very detailed MRI of your brain." Clara nodded, trying to control the nervousness growing in her chest. The previous night felt like a distant dream. The dinner, the confessions, the kiss that had ignited something deep within her. In the light of day, the reality of what she was about to do hit her with full force. "How long does it take?" she asked, watching Regina prepare an injection. "Approximately 4 hours," Dimitri replied, checking the initial readings. You'll be in an induced state of semi-consciousness, neither fully awake nor fully asleep. It's important that your brain remains active but relaxed. Regina approached with the syringe. This will help induce the proper state, she explained, without looking directly at Clara. It's a combination of microdoses of propofol and a neural stabilizer developed by Dr. Ashworth. As the needle entered her arm, Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself one last moment of doubt. Was she really ready for this? To allow memories that were not hers to be implanted in her brain, to risk her own identity for a woman she didn't know, and a man she had known for only 2 days, or perhaps much longer, in lives she couldn't remember living. But the drug was already flowing through her veins, spreading a sense of warmth and relaxation. The sounds of the lab began to seem more distant, the voices of Dimitri and Regina turning into indistinct murmurs. Behind her closed eyelids, Clara began to see patterns of light, like fractals expanding and contracting. Initiating neural mapping, Dimitri's voice seemed to come from far away. Alpha wave stable, pattern consistent with previous states. So it was true. She had been in this same chair, in this same state, in cycles her conscious mind could not access. Time lost its meaning. Clara floated in an ocean of mixed sensations, never completely unconscious, but disconnected from immediate reality. Occasionally, images would cross her mental field, flashes of places she'd never visited, faces she'd never known, feelings she had no context to understand. Were they leaks from past memories, or just the random dreams of a brain in an altered state? A voice pierced the fog of her consciousness. "Clara, can you hear me? We're almost finished with Phase 1. Slowly she emerged from the state of semi-consciousness. The laboratory came back into focus, the sounds becoming sharper, the lights more defined. Dimitri was beside her, watching her with a mix of professional concern and something more personal, more intimate. "How do you feel?" he asked, checking her pupils with a small penlight. "Strange," Clara answered, her tongue feeling heavy and clumsy. "Like, I've visited places inside my own mind that I didn't know existed." A faint smile touched Dimitri's lips. "That's a very good description of the process. Your brain is reconnecting with areas that normally remain in the subconscious." He helped her sit up, offering a glass of water that she gratefully accepted. On a nearby monitor, Clara could see 3-dimensional images of her own brain, a complex pattern of colored lights indicating different types of neural activity. "It's beautiful," she commented, fascinated despite the residual discomfort. "It's the most beautiful thing in the universe," Dimitri agreed, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Human consciousness mapped in real time. Each point of light is a thought, a memory, an emotion. Everything you are is right there." Clara felt a shiver. It was both wonderful and unsettling. The idea that her essence, everything that defined her as a person, could be reduced to patterns of neural activity that could be mapped, manipulated and potentially altered. "And now?" she asked, removing the electrodes with Regina's help. "Now you rest," Dimitri replied, saving the data on multiple systems simultaneously. "Your brain needs time to recover. Phase 2 can't begin until you're completely restabilized." "How long?" "At least 24 hours. He looked at her, his expression softening. "In the meantime, I'd like to show you something that might help you better understand what we're trying to do." After a light meal and a few hours of rest in her room, Clara met Dimitri again, who was waiting for her in the manor's indoor garden. It was a surprisingly peaceful space, a central, glass-covered atrium filled with lush vegetation and small water features that created an almost meditative atmosphere. "You used to like this place," Dimitri commented as they walked along stone paths between ferns and rare orchids. "In the last cycle, we would spend hours here talking." "About what?" Clara asked, gently touching the leaf of a tropical plant. "About everything, philosophy, ethics, the limits of science." A melancholic smile crossed his face. "You used to argue that what we were doing was unethical, even as you agreed to participate." "That sounds contradictory." "Human," Dimitri corrected gently. "We make choices that contradict our own principles when something stronger motivates us." They reached a small gazebo in the center of the garden. There, protected by glass and careful climate control, was a collection of black orchids, a variety so rare Clara had never seen one. "Cymbidium midnight," Dimitri explained. A natural mutation I developed and stabilized. Only 3 specimens in the world. They're beautiful, Clara murmured, admiring the deep velvety black of the petals, which contrasted with the flower's golden center. They were Isadora's favorite, Dmitri continued, his voice softening as he spoke her name. She said they were like life, beauty emerging from darkness. He took a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. A nearby wall slid silently open, revealing a hidden door. What I want to show you is in here. The door led to a room Clara hadn't seen yet, a circular space with glass walls displaying not images or data, but fragments of video on a continuous loop. Dozens of small screens, each showing a different scene. The memory archive, Dmitri explained, activating the room's full lighting. Every fragment you see here is a key memory we managed to isolate and preserve from Isadora's brain, before the damage became irreversible. Clara approached the screens, fascinated. On one, a young Isadora, beautiful, vibrant, full of life, ran along a deserted beach laughing at the camera. On another, she was focused in a lab much like Dmitri's, analyzing data on a holographic screen. On a third, she and Dmitri were dancing at an elegant party, their bodies close, their eyes locked on each other. She was a neuroscientist too? Clara asked, watching a screen that showed Isadora presenting at what looked like a scientific conference. Brilliant, Dmitri confirmed, pride evident in his voice. Graduated from Harvard, PhD from MIT. We worked together on the development of the original brain erase. It was her idea to use nanoparticles as vehicles for the neural compounds. Something in the way Dmitri spoke about Isadora, the reverent, almost sacred tone, made Clara feel an unexpected pang of jealousy. It was irrational, she knew. How could she be jealous of a woman in a catatonic state, for whom she was about to risk her own sanity to help? And yet the emotion was there, raw and insistent. What went wrong? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. With the original brain erase, Dmitri's expression darkened. He walked to a specific screen, showing what appeared to be a heated argument between him and Isadora in a lab. We disagreed on the final testing protocol, he explained, his voice now tense. I wanted more time, more tests on animal models. Isadora believed we were ready for limited human trials. He paused, swallowing visibly. The night of that argument, she administered the compound to herself, unsupervised, without the safety protocols I had established. Why? Why would she do something so risky? Dmitri looked away, his posture revealing a deep discomfort. Isadora was dealing with her own traumas, a childhood abuse that haunted her. She wanted to be the first to experience the freedom that brain erase promised. He walked to another screen, this one showing a different Isadora, pale, with a distant look almost as she was now, but still conscious. The compound worked initially. It isolated and neutralized the specific traumatic memories. But then it began to spread, attacking adjacent neural networks. Within 3 days, she started losing unrelated memories. In a week, she was having psychotic episodes. His voice failed him. In 2 weeks, she tried to kill herself. The pain in his voice was palpable, raw, like a wound that had never fully healed. I managed to save her, physically at least. But her mind, her consciousness, it fragmented. The doctors said it was irreversible brain damage, that the best thing would be to let her go. But you couldn't. No. The word came out like a painful confession. Not after everything we'd been through together. Not knowing that it was my caution, my insistence on more tests, that drove her to that desperate decision. Clara moved closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. The contact seemed to anchor him, to bring him back from the abyss of painful memories. And so you disappeared. Let the world believe you had both died. It was the only way, Dmitri explained, covering her hand with his. The MHRA had suspended all our research. The press turned us into villains. Isadora needed care that no hospital could provide, and I needed the freedom to develop the cure for what I had caused. He guided her to the center of the room, where a pedestal held what looked like a smaller version of the glass chamber from the main lab. Every memory fragment you see here, he continued, every preserved moment, is part of the puzzle I'm trying to piece back together. Isadora's consciousness, preserved and ready to be restored. And I'm the final piece of that puzzle, Clara completed, finally understanding the magnitude of what she was about to do. You are the catalyst, Dmitri corrected gently. The stable environment where these memories can temporarily exist, gaining enough strength to be returned to Isadora. Clara looked at the screens around them, fragments of the life of a woman she had never met, but with whom she would share the most intimate memories. What if it doesn't work? She asked, the reality of the risks involved finally hitting her with full force. If my brain rejects the memories like in the previous cycles, then we'll do what we've always done, Dmitri answered, a deep sorrow in his voice. We'll reverse the process, remove the transferred memories and erase my memories of this period, Clara finished. We'll restart the cycle. Yes, the reply was almost a whisper. But this time I truly believe we will succeed. The adjustments we've made to the protocol, based on the data from the previous cycles. And if it does work? Clara interrupted, a new question forming in her mind. If we manage to transfer the memories successfully, if they stabilize in me long enough to rebuild Isadora's consciousness, what happens to me? She hesitated. To us. The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Dmitri held her hands, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. I don't know, he admitted with brutal honesty. We've never gotten this far before. Theoretically, once the memories are transferred back to Isadora and she regains her consciousness, you would return to normal. Your own memories of this period would remain intact. And your feelings for me? Clara pressed, unable to back down now that she had broached the subject. If she comes back, completely as the woman you loved. Dmitri closed his eyes for a moment, as if the question caused him physical pain. I don't have simple answers, he finally replied. I love Isadora. I loved her for years, and I carry the guilt for what happened to her every day. He reopened his eyes, fixing them on Clara's. But I also love you, Clara, in a way I can't explain, that transcends the logic of these repeated cycles. Every time we meet, every time we get to know each other again, my feelings for you grow, they deepen. How can you love two people at the same time? The human heart doesn't follow the rules of binary logic, Dmitri answered, a faint smile touching his lips. It's not a choice of either or but a complexity of an also. Clara absorbed his words, feeling the weight of the impossible situation they were in. A love triangle where one of the vertices was trapped between life and death, dependent on the other two for her salvation. When do we start phase 2? She asked finally, her decision reaffirmed despite the emotional complications. Tomorrow, if you're ready. Dmitri squeezed her hands lightly. The procedure is more intense than the mapping. You will experience strange things, memories that are not yours, decontextualized emotions. It's important to remember who you are, to anchor yourself in your own identity. That night alone in her room, Clara faced her own tumultuous thoughts. She had become involved in something that went beyond any previous experience, a scientific experiment on the fringes of ethics, an unprecedented love triangle, a journey that could cost her her very identity. Sitting on the balcony, watching the distant lights of London, she wondered what her mother would say if she knew where she was, what she was about to do. The money that had initially motivated her to accept the job now seemed like an irrelevant detail. She was here for something deeper, an inexplicable connection to Dmitri, an almost magnetic curiosity about the experiment, and perhaps on some level she barely understood, a desire to know Isadora through her own memories. The soft sound of the piano began shortly after midnight, the same melancholic Chopin melody flowing through the manor's corridors like a river of nostalgia. This time, instead of heeding George's warning, Clara decided to follow the music. The manor's corridors were silent and dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through occasional windows. The music guided her, as if calling to her personally, to the door that led to Isadora's room. Hesitantly, Clara opened the door. The scene she found froze her in place. Isadora was sitting at the piano, her pale, slender fingers gliding over the keys with a grace that brutally contrasted with her usual catatonic state. Her long white hair fell like a veil over her inclined face, and her body, normally motionless in the hospital bed, moved gently to the rhythm of the music. Behind her, watching in silence, was Dmitri. His eyes, fixed on Isadora, held a mixture of hope and sorrow that broke Clara's heart. When he noticed her presence at the door, he didn't seem surprised. She plays like this almost every night, he explained in a low voice, moving closer to Clara. It's as if a part of her awakens when the rest of the world sleeps. Clara watched the scene with fascination. Is she conscious now? Not in the conventional sense, Dmitri replied. It's more like a state of sleepwalking. Her muscle memory takes over, guided by fragments of consciousness that temporarily emerge. It's beautiful, Clara murmured, genuinely touched by the scene. And devastating, Dmitri added, to see flashes of what she was, of what she could still be, only to watch her revert to the catatonic state when the music ends. As if in response to his words, Isadora's fingers faltered on the keys. The melody, which had flowed so naturally, began to fragment. Wrong notes, strange pauses, a rhythm that was falling apart. In a few seconds, the music ceased completely, and Isadora remained motionless, like a doll whose strings had been cut. Dmitri approached her gently, taking her in his arms with reverent care. He carried her back to the hospital bed, adjusting the monitors and blankets with the skill of someone who had performed the same ritual countless times. "We have to make this work," Clara said softly, when Dmitri had finished settling Isadora. "For her. For you." "For the three of us," Dmitri corrected, turning to face her. Under the soft light of the hospital room, with Isadora's still body as a silent witness, something shifted between them. Clara's decision, which had already been made intellectually, crystallized into an emotional commitment. She would give everything she had to this experiment, to save Isadora, to help Dmitri, to discover what impossible future might exist for the three of them. The morning of Phase 2 arrived with an almost palpable weight. The laboratory had been reorganized, with the oval glass chamber now directly connected to the chair where Clara would be positioned. A series of new devices had been installed during the night, including an intimidating-looking transcranial magnetic stimulation helmet. "The process has 3 steps, Dmitri explained, as Regina prepared the necessary injections. "First, we induce a state of neural receptivity through magnetic stimulation and chemical compounds. Next, we establish a direct link with the memory matrix. Finally, we begin the selective transfer of the key fragments." Clara watched the preparations with a surprising calm, considering what was about to happen. "How long does it take?" "The induction takes about an hour. The transfer itself about 30 minutes. But the effects," Dmitri hesitated, "the effects will begin to manifest gradually over the next 24 hours. "What kind of effects?" "Flashes of memories that aren't yours. Decontextualized sensations. Seemingly uncaused emotions." Dmitri held her hands, his gaze intensely serious. "It's important that you remember who you are, Clara, that you anchor yourself in your own identity. Isadora's memories will be powerful, vivid, but they are not yours." A lump formed in Clara's throat as she realized the gravity of what she was about to face. "And if I get lost? If I can't distinguish between her memories and mine?" "I will be with you every step of the way," Dmitri promised, monitoring, helping, reminding you of who you really are. Clara nodded, trying to absorb the reassurance in his words. "I'm ready." The first stage of the process was similar to the neural mapping, electrodes monitoring a state of semi-consciousness induced by drugs. The difference was the magnetic stimulation helmet, which sent precisely calculated pulses to specific areas of her brain, preparing them to receive external information. Time, again, lost its meaning. Clara floated in an ocean of mixed sensations, deeper than in Phase 1, approaching a dreamlike state where reality and imagination merged. When the second stage began, she felt, more than saw, the oval chamber begin to pulse with a bluish light. The fluid inside, which Dmitri had explained contained the nanoparticles loaded with fragments of Isadora's memories, circulated more rapidly, as if being activated. Establishing neural link, Dmitri's voice sounded distant, professional. "Parameters stable. Initiating synchronization." A strange sensation ran through Clara's body, like static electricity, but internal, flowing through her nerves, up her spine to her brain. It wasn't painful, but intensely uncomfortable, as if something foreign were trying to find space inside her mind. "Synchronization complete," Dmitri announced. "Initiating transfer." That's when the true impact of the process hit her. Like a wave crashing against rocks, Clara felt something invade her consciousness. not as thoughts or ideas, but as vivid, complete experiences, with all the attached sensations and emotions. She is running on the beach, the salt wind on her face, the wet sand between her toes. She is 16, just accepted to MIT, and the whole world is ahead of her, bright and full of possibilities. Her father shouts her name, Isadora, and she turns, laughing, the camera capturing the moment. She is in the lab, late at night, her eyes burning with fatigue as she examines the results of a feasibility test. The nanoparticles are responding exactly as predicted. Dmitri comes in, bringing coffee, his proud smile seeing the results. "You did it," he says, and kisses her, a kiss that mixes love and professional admiration. She is in a dark room, trembling, her body aching. She is 8 years old and her uncle has just left, telling her not to tell anyone, that no one would believe her. The pain is less physical and more a dark stain that seems to spread through her soul, a poison she will never be able to fully extract. She is at the altar, dressed in white, Dmitri before her in an elegant suit. The officiant is speaking, but she barely hears the words. All she can focus on are his eyes, the way they look at her as if she were the only person in the universe. She is in her office at Ashworth Pharma, yelling at Dmitri, frustration pulsing through her veins. "We're ready! We've tested enough. Some people need this cure now." He argues for more caution, more tests, more protocols. She feels the anger rise, mixed with a desperation he doesn't understand, the desperation of someone who has carried a trauma for too long. The fragments came in bursts, non-chronological, disconnected, but intensely vivid. It wasn't like remembering someone else's events. It was like living experiences firsthand, as if, for brief moments, Clara was Isadora. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, the flow ceased. Clara felt herself returning to her own body, her own mind, like someone emerging from deep water to the surface. "Transfer complete," Dmitri's voice announced, now closer, clearer. "Vitals stable, neural pattern within expected parameters." Clara slowly opened her eyes. The laboratory gradually reappeared, the lights, the equipment, the worried faces of Dmitri and Regina, watching her intently. "How do you feel?" Dmitri asked, checking her pupils with a small penlight. "Like..." Clara searched for the right words, her mind still disoriented. "Like I've lived several lives in minutes. Like I was her." Dmitri nodded, understanding. "It's normal." The memory fragments were transferred with their full emotional and sensory context. Your brain processed them as your own experiences. He helped her sit up, offering water, which she accepted with trembling hands. "Remember," he continued softly, "these memories are not yours. You are housing them temporarily. It's crucial that you keep your own identity intact." But even as he spoke, Clara felt something strange happening in her mind, as if Isadora's memories weren't just being stored in a separate compartment, but were beginning to seep into her own experiences, blurring the lines between what was hers and what was Isadora's. "I need to rest," she murmured, feeling a deep exhaustion take over her body. Dmitri helped her up from the chair. "I'll take you to your room. For the next 24 hours, you need to be monitored constantly. The memories will continue to manifest, possibly with more intensity as your brain processes them." The walk to her room was a blur. Clara felt as if she were floating, her body too light, her mind too heavy. When she finally lay down on her bed, she closed her eyes, exhausted, only to have more memory fragments explode behind her eyelids. "Stay with me," she asked Dmitri, holding his hand as he prepared to leave. "Please, I need an anchor." He nodded, pulling a chair to the side of the bed. He sat, still holding her hand, his thumb tracing soft circles on her skin. "Tell me about you," he requested. "About Clara, your childhood, your family, your hopes. Anything to help you remember who you are." And so, as night fell on Ashworth Manor, Clara spoke about her single mother who raised her in a simple neighborhood in Manchester, about her decision to study nursing after seeing the care her grandfather received in his final days, about her dream of one day opening a palliative care clinic in underserved communities. She spoke about Matthew, the patient she had fallen for, the guilt she carried since his death, the way she had closed herself off from emotional connections ever since. And as she spoke, she felt more anchored in her own identity, not completely, as Isadora's memories still pulsed at the edges of her consciousness, but enough not to be completely lost. Eventually, exhaustion won, and she fell asleep still holding Dimitri's hand. Waking up, a few hours later, was like emerging from a fever dream. Clara opened her eyes to find the room bathed in the golden light of dawn. Dimitri had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand, his face marked by fatigue even in rest. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then the first wave came, a memory of Isadora so vivid, so intense, that it completely overshadowed present reality. She is in the underground lab, alone. It's 3 in the morning, and Dimitri has finally gone home after another argument about testing protocols. The syringe is ready, the original brain erase compound shimmering with a bluish glow under the lab lights. Her hands are shaking, not from fear but from anticipation. After today, she will be free. Free from the memories that have tormented her for decades. Free to love Dimitri completely, without the shadows of the past. She positions the needle in her vein, takes a deep breath and pushes the plunger. The liquid flows into her blood, cold at first, then warm, pulsating. A feeling of euphoria washes over her, followed by a mental clarity she has never experienced. Hey, it's working. It's really working. The traumatic memories begin to dissolve like ink in water. But then something changes. The clarity gives way to confusion. Other memories begin to disappear too. She tries to concentrate, to control the process, but it's like trying to hold sand with open fingers. Everything is slipping away, disappearing. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Something is wrong. Very wrong, Clara gasped, sitting up abruptly in bed. The movement woke Dimitri, who immediately stood up, alert. What is it? What did you see? The night she administered the compound to herself, Clara explained, her voice trembling. It was so real, Dimitri. Like I was there. Like it was me. Dimitri held her face between his hands, forcing her to look directly at him. Remember who you are, Clara. Those are her memories, not yours. But even as he spoke, Clara felt the line between her identity and Isadora's blurring even further. The memories weren't just present. They were integrating, merging with her own experiences, creating a hybrid consciousness that was neither fully Clara nor fully Isadora. Something's wrong, she whispered, panic rising in her voice. It's not like you described. The memories aren't just being housed temporarily. They're becoming part of me. The concern in Dimitri's eyes intensified. Let's go back to the lab. I need to check your neural patterns. In the laboratory, the monitors confirmed Clara's fear. Where there had once been a clear pattern of separation between her own memories and the transferred fragments from Isadora, there was now a growing integration, the two consciousnesses beginning to merge into a single complex pattern. This has never happened before, Dimitri murmured, analyzing the data with growing alarm. In the previous cycles, the memories remained clearly distinct until the point of rejection. What does it mean? Dimitri hesitated, choosing his words carefully. It could mean your brain is accepting Isadora's memories more completely than we anticipated, integrating them instead of just housing them. Is that good or bad? It's unprecedented. He looked away from the monitors to face her. Clara, I need you to be absolutely honest. Besides the memories, are you feeling any changes in your personality? In your desires, preferences, the way you think? Clara closed her eyes, assessing herself internally. Yes, she admitted finally. I'm having thoughts that don't feel like mine. Emotional reactions to things that shouldn't affect me. It's like, she searched for the right analogy, like two rivers joining, their waters mixing until they become indistinguishable. Dimitri paled visibly. We need to reverse the process now before the integration goes any further. No. The vehemence in her own voice surprised Clara. It wasn't just her voice, there was something of Isadora in it too. Don't you understand yet? This might be exactly what we were trying to achieve. Clara, you're losing your identity. If we continue... I'm not losing my identity, she interrupted, a strange conviction taking hold of her. I'm gaining another. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Isadora needs to come back. Dimitri stared at her, conflict evident in his eyes. Explain. What if, instead of trying to separate the memories, we let them fully integrate? If I become a hybrid of Clara and Isadora, maybe we can use this new integrated consciousness as a template to rebuild hers. It's too risky, Dimitri argued. You could lose yourself completely. Become neither Clara nor Isadora, but something in between, unable to exist normally in either body. Or it could be the key to everything, Clara countered, feeling her conviction grow. Think, Dimitri. In every previous cycle, we tried to keep the memories separate, and in every cycle my brain eventually rejected them. What if the rejection occurred precisely because we were fighting the natural integration? What if the only way to stabilize the memories is to allow them to truly become a part of me? Dimitri was pacing the lab now, his entire body tense with internal conflict. Even if you're right, the risk to you is a risk I'm choosing to take, Clara stated, standing up to face him. Not just for you or for Isadora, but for myself. She moved closer to him, touching his face with an intimacy that felt both new and familiar. Since I came to this house, since I met you, I felt that something bigger was happening, something that transcends logical explanations. And now, with Isadora's memories inside me, I understand what it is. What? Belonging, Clara answered simply. You and I and her, we are connected in a way I can't explain. As if somehow our destinies were intertwined before we even met. The words were hers, but also Isadora's, a thought they both shared, crossing time and separate consciousness. Dimitri watched her with a mixture of fear and hope. If we continue and you lose yourself completely, then you'll do what you've always done, Clara finished softly. You'll reverse the process, erase the memories, and try again in another cycle. For a long moment they stared at each other, the decision hanging between them like a thread stretched to its limit. We need to go see her, Dimitri finally said. Before we decide. Isadora's room was quiet when they entered, the monitors emitting their constant beeps, measuring stable but minimal vital signs. The woman in the bed seemed paler than on Clara's previous visit, almost translucent under the soft light. Upon seeing Isadora, Clara felt a wave of emotions that were not entirely her own, love, guilt, a painful nostalgia. She approached the bed, sat on the edge, and without a second thought took Isadora's cold hand in hers. The contact triggered something unexpected. A flash of light seemed to pass between them, not physically, but on some plane that Clara felt more than saw. The monitors beside the bed registered a sudden spike in brain activity. "Dimitri," Clara called, her voice trembling. "Look at the monitors." He moved closer quickly, his eyes widening as he saw the data. "That's extraordinary. Her brain is responding to your presence, as if it recognizes you." "Not me," Clara corrected. "Her own memories now in me." Dimitri watched, fascinated, as Clara continued to hold Isadora's hand. The brain activity on the monitors remained elevated, not at the level of full consciousness, but significantly above her usual catatonic state. "We need to proceed with Phase 3, Clara declared, not as a suggestion but as a certainty. Not in the way we originally planned, but adapted to this new reality. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Instead of trying to transfer the memories back to Isadora as separate packages, we will use my hybrid consciousness as a template to rebuild hers." Clara spoke with a confidence that surprised them both. "We establish a direct neural link between us, allowing her brain to use mine as a guide to rebuild lost connections." "It's incredibly dangerous," Dimitri warned, though Clara could see hope growing in his eyes. "It's never been attempted before." "The risks to you—" "We're past the point of worrying about risks," Clara interrupted, a sad smile touching her lips. "We either move forward now, or we lose this opportunity forever." That night, as a storm gathered over the Surrey Hills, the preparations for Phase 3 were completed. The laboratory had been transformed, 2 reclining chairs side by side, connected by a complex network of equipment. In one, Isadora, carefully brought from her room. In the other, Clara, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying to reconcile the 2 streams of consciousness now flowing in her mind. Regina had prepared much more potent doses of the necessary compounds. George, the silent chauffeur, was also present, helping with the heavier equipment, his normally impassive face now clearly worried. "The process has 3 stages," Dimitri explained, his voice betraying the tension he felt. "First, we induce a state of neural synchronicity between you both. Next, we establish a direct link, allowing Isadora's brain to read the integrated patterns of yours. Finally, we begin the reverse transfer, not of the isolated memories, But of the complete patterns using your hybrid consciousness as a model. Clara nodded, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she had been in this very situation before, not just in the forgotten previous cycles, but in some other existence, some other time. If at any point your vital signs become unstable, or if we detect any sign of neural damage, I will stop everything immediately, Dimitri promised, leaning in to kiss her forehead. I will not lose you, Clara. Not this time. With the injections administered and the systems activated, the process began. The experience was unlike anything Clara had ever felt. Not entirely painful, not entirely pleasurable, but transcendental. It was as if her consciousness was being stretched, expanded beyond the limits of her own body, reaching into the void of Isadora's mind. Through the neural link, she could feel the other woman's damaged brain, dark, disconnected areas like a partially destroyed city. But she could also feel something else, points of light, small nuclei of consciousness that had survived, waiting to be reconnected. Clara couldn't explain exactly what she did next. It wasn't a scientific process, but something more intuitive, almost spiritual. Using the hybrid consciousness she now possessed, part Clara, part Isadora, she began to fill the empty spaces, to reconnect the points of light, to rebuild the destroyed neural bridges. It was exhausting, consuming every ounce of her energy, every spark of her willpower. At one point, she felt herself begin to fade, her own identity diluting as more and more of her being flowed into Isadora. That's when she felt Dimitri's touch on her hand, an anchor in physical reality. Clara, his voice was urgent, worried. Your vitals are dropping. We need to stop. Not yet, she managed to say, her own voice sounding distant even to herself. We're almost there. I can feel it. And she really could. Through the link, she felt Isadora's consciousness begin to reignite, like a fragile flame slowly gaining strength. Fragments becoming patterns, patterns becoming networks, networks becoming consciousness. That's when Isadora opened her eyes. Not an automatic movement, not a mindless reflex, but a genuine awakening. Her eyes, blurry at first, slowly came into focus. First on the ceiling, then on Dimitri, and finally on Clara. In that gaze, in that moment of mutual recognition, something profound and inexplicable passed between the two women. An understanding without words, a communion of beings that had transcended the limits of separate identity. It worked, Clara whispered, feeling the darkness begin to envelop her own consciousness as Isadora's shone brighter. She's back. The last thing she saw before her vision faded to black was Dimitri, looking from one to the other with an expression of astonishment, joy, and absolute terror. Then the world disappeared. Clara awoke slowly, like someone emerging from a deep dream. First came physical sensations, the comfort of a soft bed, the familiar scent of fresh flowers, the distant sound of birds. Then the awareness of her own body, fingers, legs, breath. Finally, she opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. No, not completely unfamiliar. Familiar, but in a strange way, as if she had seen it through someone else's eyes. She tried to sit up, only to find her body was weak, reluctant to obey her mind's commands. A gentle hand helped her, supporting her back. Slowly, said a female voice she didn't immediately recognize, you've been unconscious for days. When she finally managed to focus her vision, Clara found herself looking at a face she knew only through borrowed memories and photographs, Isadora's face. No longer pale and catatonic, but alive, alert, her dark eyes shining with intelligence and warmth. You... Clara tried to speak, her throat dry and raw. Yes, Isadora confirmed, offering a glass of water that Clara gratefully accepted. Thanks to you, I'm back. As she drank, Clara looked around, recognizing the room, her room at Ashworth Manor. How long? 9 days, Isadora answered, sitting on the edge of the bed. There were moments we feared you wouldn't come back, that you had given too much of yourself to bring me back. Dimitri, a shadow crossed Isadora's face. He's fine. Physically, at least. Emotionally. She hesitated. It's been difficult for him. For all of us. Before Clara could ask more, the door opened and Dimitri entered. Seeing her awake, he froze momentarily, a myriad of emotions crossing his face. Relief, joy, guilt, confusion. Clara, he whispered, approaching slowly, as if afraid she might disappear if he got too close. Ayu came back to us. There was something different about him, an exhaustion that went beyond the physical, a tension that wasn't there before. His gaze flickered between her and Isadora, as if he couldn't believe they were both there, conscious, alive. "How do you feel?" he asked, sitting on the other side of the bed, careful to maintain some distance. Clara assessed herself internally, searching for the right words. "Like myself, but also different, changed." "Isadora's memories?" Dmitri asked, exchanging a significant look with the other woman. "They're still here," Clara confirmed, touching her temple. "Not as vivid, more like echoes. Like memories from a book I read a long time ago, not like personal experiences." "And mine?" Isadora asked softly. "Did you manage to transfer them all back?" Clara closed her eyes, concentrating. "I believe so. The most important ones, at least. The anchors of your identity." A strange silence fell over the room. Three people connected by an unprecedented experiment, by shared memories, by feelings that transcended conventional definitions. "What happens now?" Clara asked finally, the question that had been hanging between them from the beginning. Dmitri and Isadora exchanged glances again, a silent communication that spoke of conversations already had, decisions already discussed. "I remember everything." "Clara," Isadora began, her voice gentle. "Not just my own memories, but also fragments of yours, of how much you risked for me, for us. And I remember all the previous cycles," Dmitri added. "The times you came to this house when we met grew close. When you fell in love with both of us," Isadora completed, surprising Clara with her frankness. "Just as Dmitri fell in love with you, while holding on to his love for me." "I don't know what to say," Clara admitted, the reality of the situation finally hitting her with full force. "How can three people—" "There's no manual for what we've lived through," Dmitri said, a faint smile touching his lips for the first time. "Nor for what we feel. But maybe we don't need one. What are you suggesting?" Clara asked, her heart racing. It was Isadora who answered, taking one of Clara's hands in hers. "We're suggesting that maybe we don't have to choose. That maybe there's enough room for all of us in this strange connection that's been created." "A three-person relationship?" Clara asked, unable to hide her surprise. "It's not that simple, nor that definable," Dmitri replied, taking her other hand. "It's something new, something that perhaps has never existed before. A connection that transcends the conventional boundaries of identity and love." Clara looked from one to the other, feeling something awaken within her, not just desire or affection, but a deep sense of belonging. As if somehow the three of them were pieces of a puzzle that only made sense when joined together. "We need time," she said finally. "All of us. To heal, to understand each other, to figure out what this means." "We have all the time in the world now," Isadora answered, smiling. "Ashworth Manor can be our refuge while we figure it out." "And after?" Clara asked. "After," Dmitri replied, "perhaps we'll be ready to return to the world. Not as we were before, but as we have become. Together." That night, as the full moon lit up the Surrey hills, three figures walked through the gardens of Ashworth Manor, not holding hands, not completely at ease yet, but together, united by an experiment that had transcended science, by memories that had crossed the frontiers of individual identity, by a love that defied definition. And in the center of the garden, surrounded by black orchids with golden centers, they allowed themselves to dream of a future that none of them could have imagined alone, a future that